analysis, we study linear spaces endowed with some kind of limit related structures and the linear functions respecting these structures in some suitable sense. So the limit related structure may be like a norm, or maybe arising out of an inner product, or more generally from a topology. Okay. So if you are endowing a linear space, okay, you are considering linear space with a norm, we will call them as normed spaces. If you are giving an inner product, we will call it as inner product spaces. And if you are giving a topology, we will call it as a topological vector spaces. Okay. So all these are somewhat different ways to introduce this type of ideas like related with limits like continuity convergence into an arbitrary vector spaces. So the early idea, the first idea of functional analysis can be seen in the work on integral equations by Volterra in 1887, an Italian mathematician. And it is one of the highest abstractions in the mainstream of mathematics, where you can see the unity and the largest interplay of the different branches of mathematics. And also, it is not possible to imagine any further development of mathematics or its applications which will not bear on it the impact of the thought process of this area of functional analysis. It is really a far-reaching consequences. The results that obtained in functional analysis or the thought process related with functional analysis is penetrated between different areas and interdisciplinary subjects. Functional analysis may be thought of as a study of certain topological algebraic structures and the method by which the knowledge of these structures can be applied to analytic problems. So it is as we will see, it is a rare blend of the three important branches of mathematics, namely algebra, analysis, and topology. And a sound knowledge in these three is essential, very much essential for a better understanding of the concepts in functional analysis. Okay, the name functional analysis was coined by the mathematician Hadamard around 1903. And the major breakthrough in the subject is the Hilbert's generalization of spectral theory of finite dimensional vector spaces to the infinite dimensional case. The ultimate Hilbert space, little L2, is being introduced, and it is the most important single breakthrough for the birth of modern functional analysis. The axioms for Hilbert space were first enunciated by John von Neumann in 1927 in his monumental exposition of the mathematical formulation of quantum mechanics. And the axioms for a norm space, as we study now, goes back to the work of the mathematician Ries on integral equations. So functional analysis plays an increasing role in the applied science as well as in mathematics itself, and it is at the very core of numerical simulations, quantum information theory, etc. Okay, see, even though the subject of functional analysis is developed around 1903 or like that, it has far developed into, and there are many different branches of functional analysis. Actually, the subject had a very rich development, so that many different branches have been aroused. Okay, let us look at the major branches. One is the study of norm linear spaces and inner product spaces. See, in non-linear spaces, the advantage is that, okay, in a linear space, as you know, there is no concept of distance, but in a non-linear space, you can see, in a vector space, you can't talk about geometry, but in non-linear spaces, you, you can think about unit balls and spheres. That is possible. So a geometric structure is being introduced into an arbitrary vector space. Or in an inner product space, what happens? You can generalize the concept of orthogonality even when there is no BBS Euclidean context. And these ideas like nonlinear spaces and inner product spaces provides important tools for scientific investigations in mathematical physics, electrical engineering, and optimization. Another branch is operator theory, where one studies about linear functions or operators between function spaces, usually Hilbert spaces. Then we will look at the spectrum of operator and how to classify operators like that. Another branch is operator algebras, where we not study individual operators, but we will look at collections of operators. And the study of operator algebras has direct applications to representation theory, differential geometry, quantum statistical mechanics, quantum information, and quantum field theory. So these are the some major branches. The subject is still goes on developing, and more new areas of research is being introduced every day. So we will give you at the end of the lecture, we will give some introduction to a most recent area of research in functional analysis. Now we will move on to okay, we will discuss about norm spaces and especially about Banach spaces. See, in Euclidean space, okay, so the space around us that we are living could be described as a three-dimensional Euclidean space. As you know, we are living in a three-dimensional world. Now, in order to single out a point of the space R3, you know, we need three coordinates. Actually, we need a fixed frame of reference and three real numbers, which are the coordinates of that point. Okay. So, in order to describe a pair of points in R3, actually, we need six real numbers. That means we need a six-step. Or if you want to describe a three points in the space, we need 9 real numbers. So that it is natural to think about, okay, R2, R3 are very common to us. And this shows us that the necessity of considering the finite dimensional vector spaces Rn. So on Rn, the Euclidean space Rn, we have a very rich structure. It is a vector space. You have an addition and scalar multiplication. And on Rn, you have a metric structure. So the linear space structure allows us to add two vectors of Rn and scalar multiply. You can add, subtract, multiply, and all that things are possible. Multiply by scalars with real scalars or complex scalars, whatever it is. And also the metric space gives us a distance to think about limit and continuity, convergence, that type of ideas can be established. So on Rn, we have any vector is an n-tuple. Now corresponding to an n-tuple, we can have the concept of the length of a vector. In Euclidean space Rn, you know the length of any n-tuple x1, x2, xn is given as the non-negative square root of x1 square plus x2 square plus etc plus xn square. This actually gives the distance of the point x equal to the n-tuple x1, x2, etc, xn from the origin. Okay. Now this distance or this length of a vector has many properties. Now we will generalize these properties to get an idea of length. into a arbitrary vector space. So we generalize the length, the concept of length of a vector to an arbitrary vector space, and we isolate the properties of this Euclidean length. Of course, you know it will be greater than or equal to 0 and equal to 0 if and only if that n tuple is 0. And of course, you are having, if you multiply with a scalar throughout, what will happen? The n tuple will become kx1, kx2, etc., kxn. And if you go for the length of that vector, mod k will come out. And you know, you can see that a triangle inequality type thing is also available. So let us generalize these ideas to an arbitrary vector space. So we define norm of a vector. Here the vector may be any arbitrary vector. We are considering an arbitrary vector space over K. K stands either for R or C. In functional analysis, we will consider vector spaces over the field of real numbers or over the field of complex numbers. So let X be a vector space over K. Then by a norm, we mean a function from X to R with the properties that, first of all, the norm should be greater than or equal to 0. And secondly, norm of X equal to 0 if and only if X equal to 0. These two properties together is known as positive definiteness. Secondly, okay, as the third condition, we need norm kx must be equal to mod k times norm x. This should be true for all x in X and for any k belongs to the field K. So norm of kx equal to mod k times norm x. This property is known as the homogeneity of the norm. Okay. Now, as the fourth condition, we require that norm of x plus y less than or equal to norm x plus norm y. This should be true for all xy in X, and we call this as the triangle inequality. So, in generalizing the Euclidean length to an arbitrary vector space, we are obtaining a function which is known as norm satisfying these four properties, namely positive definiteness, homogeneity, and triangle inequality. See, look at the positive definiteness. Here in the second condition, norm x equal to 0, if and only if x equal to 0, the one condition is always there. Which one? X equal to 0 will imply that norm x equal to 0. That is true always. But in some cases, norm x equal to 0 doesn't mean that x equal to 0. Okay. So in that situation, with all other properties except the second one, only one direction, such a function will be known as a semi-norm. Okay. So a normed space means a linear space along with a norm defined on it. A linear space along with a norm defined on it is called a normed space or a normed linear space. So if you go for examples, the simplest one is you can take K, that means either R or C, and you know the absolute value will be a norm. As you know, the modulus function satisfies all these requirements. Modulus function satisfies all these four conditions for a norm. And so, of course, modulus is a norm on K. And in more generally, you can show that any norm on K will be a positive scalar multiple of this modulus function. It is very easy to show it. Any norm on K will be a positive scalar multiple of this modulus function. Generally, you can think about the n-dimensional spaces Kn with P norm, you can give norm like this P norm, which is a generalization of the Euclidean length. The formula is given for any n tuple x equal to x1 extra xn. We define the P norm as sigma j equal to 1 to n mod x of j power p all power 1 by p. So for any choice of P, this will give you a norm. We will call it as the P norm. In order to establish that this definition makes sense, will become a norm. Of course, the positive definiteness are quite easy. Homogeneity will also directly follow. In order to establish the triangle inequality, sometimes we may need Minkowski's inequality, okay, which is given here, the Minkowski's inequality. Sigma mod Aj plus Bj power P all raised to 1 by P is less than or equal to sigma mod Aj power P all power 1 by P plus sigma mod Bj power Q all power 1 by Q, where P and Q such that 1 by P plus 1 by Q equal to 1. This is actually an inequality is obtained by, derived by using Young's inequality and thereby using Hölder's inequality. Okay. So this Minkowski's inequality will be helpful to establish that this P norm satisfies the triangle inequality. I'm not at all going to the details of the proof, but one can easily show that this P norm makes sense and it defines a norm on Kn. And for P equal to infinity also you can have you can define a norm, namely the sup norm, which is given as maximum of mod of xj with 1 less than or equal to j less than or equal to m. The maxima is taken over all j equal to 1 to x try. Here no problem will arise, everything will follow. The triangle inequality will follow from the triangle inequality of the modulus. The advantage of this norm structure is that you can think about balls. You can talk about balls and spheres in a norm space. So the unit closed ball is a set of all vectors with norm less than or equal to 1. That is the unit closed ball. And sphere means unit sphere means all x in x with norm x equal to 1. So in an arbitrary vector space, you are not having a obvious Euclidean context. Still, you can have the geometry. So that is the beauty of the non-linear space structure. You can talk about unit balls, spheres. So you are having a geometry in a arbitrary vector space by introducing a norm there. Okay. So we have seen that every norm space is consisting of a linear space along with a norm defined on it. Norm is nothing but a generalization of the concept of length of a vector, satisfying four properties. Of course, okay. Now, using this idea of length, we can get a concept of distance. So, how to get that distance? If you define d of xy equal to norm of x minus y for any x and y in the norm space x, you can see that this d satisfies all the requirement for a metric or a distance function. You know, a distance function d should be a function, okay, defined on some set x, should be a function from x cross x to r with the property that d of xy should be greater than or equal to 0 and equal to 0 if and only if x equal to y, and symmetric dxy is the same as dyx, and of course the triangle inequality dxy less than or equal to dxz plus dzy. So that conditions can be obtained if you define d of xy like as norm x minus y. So this definition introduces a metric in a norm space. So in particular, you are having a distance. There is a natural way to introduce a distance concept in a norm space. So you can think about continuity and convergence. So you can say that in this sense, if you are, so you can conclude that every norm space is a metric space from this. You have a metric space structure on a norm space. So every norm space can be regarded as a metric space. Okay. And you know all metric spaces are topological spaces. So in particular, all norm spaces are topological spaces. Here, okay, you can see that the norm can be retrieved as distance of x to the point 0 to the origin. Norm x can be regarded as dx0. So if your metric d is defined as d of xy equal to norm x minus y, your norm can be retrieved as norm x equal to the distance of x to the point 0. That means the origin of that space, or the 0 vector of that space. In Euclidean context, it is the origin. Okay. Now, can we have the other way? That means if you are having a metric space, if you are having a metric on a normed space, sorry, a metric on a linear space, is it possible to define dx0 as norm x, and will it be a norm? See, I am asking that if you are defining your metric using the norm, then everything is okay. Now, can we do the other way? If you are given with a metric, is it possible to get a norm by setting as norm x equal to dx0 always? It is not possible. For example, you consider this one, d of xy equal to modulus of root of modulus of x minus y. This will be a metric. See, this will be a metric on R. Everything can be established. Of course, greater than or equal to 0 will easily follow. Symmetry will also follow. For triangle inequality, you have to do little tricks. That is also can be obtained from the triangle inequality of modulus. So it is a metric. Now, if you define dx0 with this metric, then will it give you a norm? That means you are having norm x equal to root of mod x. Will it be a norm? A quick check shows that the homogeneity will be loose. We won't get homogeneity. So that shows that this is not a norm. So in general, every norm space is a metric space, but metric spaces you cannot be, it is not possible to introduce norm always. So, okay, so if we are having a, so in an arbitrary vector space, we have introduced a norm, and that norm provides us a distance structure, a metric d of xy equal to norm x minus y. Therefore, you can think about the convergence of sequences. We are able to deal with sequences and their convergence. So consider a sequence. We will say that a sequence xn converges to some number x if for any epsilon greater than 0, there is a natural number n such that the distance between xn and x is less than epsilon after that n. So that means we have for any epsilon greater than 0, there is an n with the property that norm xn minus x less than epsilon for all n greater than or equal to n. So this is the way in which we are introducing the convergence in a normed space. See, in an arbitrary vector space, you can't do this. But if you have a norm there, you can think about the convergence of sequences. Okay. Of course, you can think about Cauchy sequences. We will say that a sequence xn is a Cauchy sequence if for any epsilon greater than 0, there is an n such that norm xn minus xn is less than epsilon for all mn greater than or equal to n. Of course, that is the usual generalization of Cauchy sequences. In Euclidean spaces, we have this idea. Xn is Cauchy means that dxm xn less than epsilon for all mn greater than or equal to. In exactly the same way, we have extended the notion of Cauchy sequences to norm spaces. Now, if all the Cauchy sequence happens to be converse, in that situation, we will call that norm space as complete norm spaces. So a norm space is said to be complete if every Cauchy sequence converges in that space. Now, what is the role of this completeness? What is the relevance? What is the importance of this completeness? See, generally, in any scientific investigation or a scientific experiment, we will make a finite number of experiments and we will have a finite number of observations, and we want to consider or we want to get some conclusions about the ideal situation. See, the ideal situation we cannot reach in a laboratory. So what we will do is that we will repeat the process with different precisions, and we will look at the observations, finite number of observations, and from that we need to conclude what happens in the ideal situation. So there is a process of approximation from finite to infinite. See, from the finite number of observations, we want to conclude what happens in the ideal situation. So that process of approximation is there. So in this situation, one has to be, in some sense, to be sure that the limiting case exists within the framework of the space under consideration. So we need to have some kind of assurance that the limiting situation or the limiting case is existing within the framework of the space under consideration. So that part is being ensured by the notion of completeness. If a space is complete, then whatever Cauchy sequence you take, you can, even though you don't know the exact limit, there is an assurance that the limit will be within that space. So that is the advantage and relevance of completeness. So a norm space in which all Cauchy sequence happens to converge is termed as complete norm spaces, and they are very specific and very special, and sometimes they will be called as Banach spaces in honor of the Polish mathematician Stefan Banach. So Banach spaces are complete norm spaces. So complete norm spaces means that, so Banach space means you are having a linear space along with a norm. Using that norm, you have a metric. With respect to that metric, all Cauchy sequence in that space converges. So that is the concept of Banach space, a complete norm space, complete in the metric induced by the norm. Okay. So you can observe that if you have a sequence, Cauchy sequence in Kn, you know every element of Kn is an n-tuple. So if you go for a sequence in Kn, then it will be a sequence of n-tuples, and you can show that a sequence with respect to the p norm, whether it is finite p or p equal to infinity, that means a subnorm, you can see that a sequence in Kn will be a Cauchy sequence if and only if the corresponding coordinate sequences are Cauchy in K. And you know K is either R or C, both of them are complete spaces, so the Cauchy sequences in K are converging. So you can conclude that any Cauchy sequence in Kn with respect to any of the norms P with 1 less than or equal to P less than or equal to infinity are also converges. So all these Kns with different P norms are all Banach spaces. So we have a plenty of examples of Banach spaces, and all these are finite dimensional Banach spaces. As vector spaces, they are of n dimension, they are finite dimensional. Okay. And more generally, if you have considered any finite dimensional norm space, means a linear space with a finite number of vectors as basis, finite dimensional norm spaces, you can proceed by induction to establish that they are all Banach spaces. So you can show that every finite dimensional norm space will be closed, so that every Cauchy sequence will have limit inside it. So all finite dimensional norm spaces are Banach spaces. So not only Kn, whatever finite dimensional space you take, they are all happens to be Banach space. So under any norm, okay, if you are having a finite dimensional vector space and then you define any norm on it, you can always be assured that they will be all Banach spaces. All Cauchy sequences will be convergent. Okay. Now, once you introduced a, an object or a construct, then the next thing is check for examples for it. Now, there is a natural way to get more examples is constructing new spaces from all domains. So if you are given with a norm space, then there is a natural way to get more norm spaces by taking subspaces. So any subspace, you know the idea of subspace in linear algebra, subspace of a vector space. Now if you consider any subspace of a linear normed space, that will be a normed space. The restriction of norm will give you a norm on that space. Okay. So every subspace of a normed space is a normed space. And moreover, if you take the closure of a subspace, then what will happen? The closure will be again a subspace. So you can define the norms on limit points by using the limiting ideas. You can define the norm. So you will be having that the closure of a subspace is again a norm space. And one thing can be ensured: if your space under consideration is a Banach space, then any closed subspace, in particular closure of any subspaces, are again Banach spaces. So if X is a Banach space, then any closed subspace Y of X or the closure of Y are all Banach spaces. Another way to construct norm spaces is going to the quotients. So if you have a closed subspace Y of a norm space, then you can consider the quotient space X by Y consisting of cos X plus Y. Okay, you know the cosets. So the set of all cosets will become a normed space where we have to define the norm as the quotient norm, which is given by this expression, infimum of norm of X plus Y with Y element of Y. You can, of course, check that this is a norm. We will call it as a quotient norm. This makes X by Y into a normed space. And what about the Banach space case? You can see that if your space X is a Banach space and Y is a closed subspace, then you can see that the quotient space X by Y is also a Banach space with respect to the quotient norm. Then if you have a set of normed spaces, then you can think about their product spaces. So suppose that you are given with xj's with norm j's for j equal to 1 to extra n, then you can consider their Cartesian product x1 cross extra cross xn. There is a natural way to get norms on that. For any p, you have the norm p norm of x by defining like that one norm of x, say x is an n tuple with xi's from the space xi with norm I. So you can define the norm of an n tuple as norm of x1 with respect to the one norm, with respect to the norm on the space x1 raised to p plus extra for the n coordinate norm of it with respect to the norm on the space xn raised to the power p, whole of this sum raised to the power 1 by p. So this will be a norm. And for the subnorm case is also possible. You can define the norm as the maximum of one norm of x1 extra, nth norm of xn. So this will be also giving you a norm on the product space. And you can say that uh, this product space x equal to x1 cross extra cross xn with any of these p norms will be a Banach space, uh, if and only if each of the coordinate spaces xj's are Banach spaces. So all this gives you ways to construct more Banach spaces or more norm spaces from a given space, so that we are getting a number of examples. Okay, now we will move on to some specific examples like sequence spaces. So let us consider the space of all scalar sequences x1, x2, extra with the property that sigma mod x of j power p is finite. We will call this as p summable scalar sequences. So little lp stands to denote the collection of all p summable scalar sequences, where p is of course such that 1 less than or equal to p finite. So this will be a linear space. You can easily check that it is closed under addition as well as under scalar multiplication. Everything will follow by using Minkowski's inequality. So it is a linear space. Now on this linear space, we can define the p-norm. So p-norm of any sequence x is defined as sigma j equal to 1 to infinity mod x of j power p all power 1 by p. So you can easily check that this is a norm. We will call it as the p-norm. So little lp is always considered with this p-norm. Okay, so you are having for various choices of p, you are having L1, L2, L3 like that. You have many spaces, all spaces of 1 summable, 2 summable like that sequences. And also for the p equal to infinity case, we are having the space of all bounded scalar sequences. Supremum of mod x of j is finite. So bounded scalar sequences, we will call them as little infinity. This space has little infinity. Now this little infinity, L infinity, we have the subnorm, which is defined to be subnorm of x equal to supremum of mod x of g. Here also you can establish that these spaces are all having the property that under the induced metric, they are all happens to be complete. That means every Cauchy sequence will converge within the space. So that these are all Banach spaces. These are all Banach spaces. So all these sequence spaces are examples for Banach spaces. Now let us look at the relation between these spaces. Now using an inequality called Jensen's inequality, which says that for these p norms you have that inequality. If p is less than q, then the q norm will be less than or equal to p norm. That is known as the Jensen's inequality. By appealing with that inequality, you can show that whenever a sequence is p summable, it is also q summable, provided 1 less than or equal to p less than q less than infinity. So that shows that LP is contained in LQ, and the inclusion is strict. That can be obtained by looking at the example of the sequence 1 by n raised to 1 by p. If you consider the sequence 1 by n raised to 1 by p, you know it is not p summable, because if you go for the p norm, if you go for sigma mod x of j power p, that will give you sigma 1 by n, which is a harmonic series, which is not convergent. So so the series, so the sequence 1 by n raised to 1 by p is not a member of LP. But if you go for the q sum, that means sigma mod x of j power q, in that case, you are having sigma modulus of, sigma 1 by n power q by p. Now p less than q, so q by p will be greater than 1. So it is a p series with the p series with a sigma 1 by n power q by p with q by p greater than 1. Therefore it will converge. That means the sequence is Q summable. So, so the sequence 1 by n raised to 1 by p is belonging to LQ but not to little lp. So little lp is a properly contained in little lq. So that is the way of inclusion among these spaces. So you are having that little L1 is properly contained in little L2 is properly contained in little L3 like that. And what about L infinity? L infinity case, you can see that whatever finite p, whatever for any finite number p, little lp is properly contained in L infinity. Why? You know that you can see that any p summable sequence will of course be bounded. So every LP will be contained in L infinity. But what about the constant sequence 1, 1, 1, 1, 1? It is bounded. So it will belong to L infinity. But is it belongs to LP, the constant sequence 1, 1, 1, 1? If you go for the sum, sigma mod x of j power p all raised to 1 by p having infinite. So that sum is not finite. So you see that the constant sequence 1, 1, 1, 1 doesn't belongs to any of the LP, but it belongs to L infinity, showing that LP is properly contained in L infinity. So this is the inclusion relation among the sequence spaces. Now let us look at some subspaces of the sequence spaces. Okay. So C naught naught corresponds to the space of all scalar sequences with only finitely many non-zero terms. And C naught stands for the space of all sequences, scalar sequences converging to zero, and little c stands for the space of all convergent sequences. So you can see that if a sequence consists of only finitely many non-zero terms, then of course its p sum sigma mod x of j power p will have only finitely many terms, therefore it will be again always finite. So you can see that C naught naught is always contained in LP. Okay, but LP has many elements which are not in C naught naught. Therefore C naught naught is properly contained in LP. And you know, an element belongs to LP means that it is p summable. That means sigma mod x of j power p is finite. And you know that means that infinite series converge. And from the idea of infinite series, you know that the necessary condition for convergence is that the limit of the nth term must be 0. So if x belongs to LP, x means the sequence x1, x2, etc. belongs to LP, then definitely x of j should tend to 0 as j tends to infinity. So that means any member of LP will belong to is actually a sequence converging to 0. So LP is contained in C naught. LP is contained in C naught. But of course, you know, 1 by n raised to 1 by p, the example that we have considered, 1 by n raised to 1 by p doesn't belongs to LP, but its limit goes to 0. But its limit goes to 0, so it belongs to C naught. And therefore LP is precisely contained in properly contained in C naught. And this C naught, of course, you know, there are sequences which are converging to non-zero numbers. So C naught is properly contained in C. And you know, every convergent sequence is bounded. Therefore C is contained in L infinity. And you know that there are bounded sequences which are doesn't converging. 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1. It doesn't converge. Or 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. It is in L infinity, but it is not convergent. So all these inclusions are proper. So these are the examples of sequence spaces and their subspaces and the inclusion relation among these spaces. Here, see, C naught naught is not closed. For example, if you consider the sequence x1 as the sequence 1, 0, 0, 0, x2 as 1, 1 by 2, 0, 0, 0, x3 as 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 0, 0, 0, or generally xn as the sequence 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, extra 1 by n, and rest of the terms are 0, then that sequence xn, x1, x2, extra xn, converging to the sequence 1 by n. 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 4, like that, which has infinitely many non-zero terms. So the sequence 1 by n is a limit of, say, is a limit of a sequence in C naught naught, but sequence 1 by n is not in C naught naught. So that shows that C naught naught is not closed. Actually, it is an infinite dimensional subspace. It is an infinite dimensional subspace of LP. So this is not closed. Therefore, it is not complete. So C naught naught with respect to the P norm is not a complete normed space. It is not a, therefore it is not a Banach space. And you can observe that the closure of C naught naught will be the space of all scalar sequences converging to 0, C naught. And this, of course, C naught will be a Banach space. Now let us move on to some other examples. I am not at all going to the details of this. So function spaces. The simplest ones are the bounded continuous functions on a set T. If you are taking compact sets, then you can simply say about continuous functions, because continuous functions on a compact set will be automatically bounded. If you are taking an arbitrary set, you have to think about bounded continuous functions. Here you can give a norm, namely subnorm, for any f, for any bounded continuous function f on t. You can define subnorm as supremum of mod f of t with t element of t. Supremum is taken over all t element of t. You can establish that it is a norm. So this will make set of all bounded continuous functions on a set T is a normed space into a normed space. And you can see that the convergence with respect to this norm is nothing but the uniform convergence. And from your analysis classes, you know that convergence with respect to the, or uniform convergence, what is the uniform limit theorem? Uniform limit of a sequence of continuous functions is again continuous. So if all the terms are bounded, then the limit function is also bounded. So if you go for a sequence of bounded continuous functions and you take the limit under the subnorm, then the convergence is the uniform convergence. And from uniform limit theorem, you can ensure that the limiting space, the limit of the sequence is again a bounded continuous function. That shows that every Cauchy sequence converges here within the space. So, so C of t, space of all bounded continuous functions on t with respect to subnorm, is an example for a Banach space. Now we can go for a more general class, p integrable functions on a measurable set E, which will be denoted by capital LP, where you have to give the norm as norm of E mod x power p dm all raised to 1 by p for 1 less than or equal to p less than infinity. Here also you can establish that this is a norm. See, for any p integrable function, some problem will arise. If the function is 0, then of course the norm will be 0. But the norm equal to 0 means that integral is 0. But integral 0 doesn't imply that the function is actually 0. But it only implies that the function is 0 almost everywhere on the domain. So norm xp, so p norm of x equal to 0 will imply only that x is equal to 0 almost everywhere on E. So you have to go for, so this doesn't satisfy the requirements for a norm or a metric. So you have to go for equivalence classes. We will introduce an equivalence relation to functions are being identified if they are almost everywhere the same. So with that identification, if you consider the space of all equivalence classes, then this will become a norm, and LP of E will become a normed space, and it can be shown that under the norm, under this norm, this space is a complete normed space or a Banach space. You can see that all LP spaces are Banach spaces for any choice of 1 less than or equal to p less than infinity. And for p equal to infinity, just like little L infinity, we are having the space of all bounded scalar sequences. Here also you can think about another, think about a similar situation. We will consider the space of all essentially bounded functions. the equivalence classes of essentially bounded functions that constitute the space L infinity of V. There also you have the sup norm. Under that norm, it will become a Banach space. I am not at all going to the details of that. So all these spaces, capital LP of P, for any choice of P with 1 less than or equal to P less than or equal to infinity, all happens to be Banach spaces. So we have a rich list of Banach spaces. Now, just consider the space CAB. See, so far we have listed only one example for a norm space which is not a Banach space, namely C naught naught with a P norm. C naught naught, the space of all scalar sequences with only finitely many non-zero terms with P norm. We have seen that it is not closed, therefore it is not a Banach space with respect to the P norm. Now you just consider space of all continuous functions on AB with P norm. It can be proved that this space is dense in LPAB. And you know that LPAB, capital LPAB, this is a Banach space, and this CAB is dense here, means that and CAB is not the same as LPAB. So that shows that CAB is not closed in LPAB. Therefore, this CAB with respect to P norm is not a Banach space. It's not a Banach space. So we have seen that the same space, same linear space, with respect to the sup norm, it will become a Banach space. See, the compactness of AB ensure that all the continuous functions are bounded. So this is exactly the same space considered in this here. Bounded continuous functions on a T with sup norm, exactly the same CAB. CAB with sup norm is exactly the same space. It will be a Banach space. But CAB with P norm is not a Banach space. So the same space with respect to different norms may or may not be complete. So this is an example for a incomplete normed space. CAB with the P norm is an example for a incomplete normed space. Now, let us see what happens to the classical theorems while extending it to the general situations of arbitrary vector space, arbitrary normed spaces. You know the classical Hein-Borel theorem, which says that a subset of the Euclidean space Rn is compact if and only if it is closed and bounded. That result is known as the Hein-Borel theorem. And that what happens to this classical theorem if we generalize to a arbitrary normed space? It can be proved that this Hein-Borel theorem holds for a norm space if and only if the norm space under consideration is a finite dimensional vector space. So that means, more precisely, we have the statement, if X is a norm space, then the following are equivalent. So every closed and bounded subset of X is compact, the unit closed ball in X is compact, and X is finite dimensional. All these statements are equivalent. So that shows that the Hein-Borel theorem holds in an arbitrary norm space if and only if the norm space is finite dimensional. Okay, I am not at all going to prove this theorem, but remember that this classical Hein-Borel theorem will be true in a norm space only if the space is finite dimensional. Let us see what happens. We will give an example for an infinite dimensional norm space. So C01, consider the space of all continuous functions on 01 with respect to the sup norm. Okay. So, you know, this is a complete normed space. It's a norm space, it's a Banach space. We will show that the unit closed ball in C01 is not compact. Now, how to show that? You know, C01 is a normed space. In particular, it is a metric space. And you know, in metric spaces, compactness is equivalent to sequential compactness. That means, in order to show that the space is compact, we need only to show that it is sequentially compact. Sequentially compact means that every sequence has a convergent subsequence. So you just consider the functions gn of x defined by x power n, gn of x equal to x raised to n. All of them are continuous functions on 0, 1. And of course, if you go for the subnorm, okay, I haven't defined the operator norms, but you know how to compute the norms with an assumption that you will see all these GNs are of norm 1, means that they are belonging to the unit closed ball in C0. So all these GNs are in the unit closed ball of C01. So the sequence GN is a sequence in the unit closed ball of C01. Now, where these GNs converge? Okay, suppose that it has a convergent subsequence. Suppose that it has a convergent subsequence, then it should converge to a function. You know, the function is defined by x power n, and x is taken from closed interval 0, 1. So whenever 0 less than or equal to x less than 1, x power n will goes to 0 as n tends to infinity. And when x equal to 1, x power n will goes to 1. So this Gn of x, if you have a subsequence, convergent subsequence, then the limit of that convergent sequence will be the function which is 0 for 0 less than or equal to x less than 1 and 1 for x equal to 1. So if this sequence Gn, which is a sequence in the unit closed ball of C01, if it happens to converge to some function, then that limit function will be equal to 0 if 0 less than or equal to x less than 1 and 1 if x equal to 1, which is not a continuous function. So which is not in C01, which is not in the unit closed ball, and more particularly it is not in C01 itself. So you have seen that this sequence which belongs to the unit closed ball in C01 doesn't admit any convergent subsequence. So that shows that this space is not sequentially compact. That shows that it is not compact. So the closed and bounded subset or the unit closed ball in C01 is not compact. So the Hein-Borel theorem fails. And here, remember that C01 with subnorm is an infinite dimensional vector space. Can you get an infinite linearly independent set that? You just look at the monomials, 1, t, t square, t cube extra, they form an infinite linearly independent set in C01. So C01 is a infinite dimensional space. So this infinite dimensional space, we have seen that the unit closed ball is not compact. That means the Hein-Borel theorem doesn't hold. So remember that the Hein-Borel theorem holds in a norm space if and only if the norm space under consideration must be of finite dimension. Okay. Now, just look at something about continuity. I told you that the need for introducing the concept of norm is to think about limit related notions like convergence and continuity. So in order to define continuity of linear, see, in norm spaces, we have to account for the linear structure also. So instead of considering arbitrary functions, we are interested in linear functions or linear transformations. So if x and y are norm spaces, a map is called linear if it has the property that it respects the addition f of x plus y equal to f of x plus f of y and f of kx equal to k times f of x. So such kind of functions are called linear transformations or linear maps. And it can be proved that a linear map is continuous if and only if it is continuous at 0. So because of this linearity, continuity at a single point, continuity at the 0 element ensures the continuity at every point. In fact, the function will be uniformly continuous. Or the continuity at 0 is equivalent to boundedness on a closed ball about 0. So if your function, if your linear map is bounded in a closed neighborhood about 0, then also the function will be continuous. So all these are necessary and sufficient requirements. Or more generally, you can get another condition. There is an alpha greater than 0 such that norm f of x less than or equal to alpha times norm x for all x element of x. So in that case also, this is also a necessary and sufficient. And more generally, you can have f is continuous if and only if it is bounded. Bounded means a function is said to be bounded means that it takes bounded sets into bounded sets. So if that is the case, then the function will be continuous. And in norm spaces, we have many advantages. If the domain space is of finite dimensional, it can be proved that every linear map will be continuous. And if your X is an infinite dimensional space, and if Y is not the identically zero space, in that case, there is always a function, always a linear map which is discontinuous. I'm not at all going to prove these things, just pointing out these details. Now you can think about linear homeomorphism. In order to identify nonlinear spaces, we need linear homeomorphism, because here we are having the topological structure induced by the metric. We have a topological structure as well as a linear space structure. So in order to identify two normed linear spaces, we need linear homeomorphisms. So what is a linear homeomorphism? Which is a linear map, which is both on one and on two, and also which is both continuous, and its inverse functions are also continuous. So that is all we mean by linear homeomorphisms. So here there are many conditions, equivalent characterizations of linear homeomorphisms. I will just point out one thing. If there is a linear homeomorphism from a norm space X to Y, then X is complete if and only if Y is complete. So if there is a linear homeomorphism from a space X to a norm space Y, then the norm space X is complete if and only if the space Y is complete. Here you can see how the linearity plays a crucial role. Generally, between two topological spaces, suppose that you are having a homeomorphism between X and Y, or a metric spaces, topological spaces or metric spaces. Suppose that you are having a homeomorphism from X to Y, then it doesn't mean that one is complete, doesn't ensure that the other one is complete. For example, real line with the usual metric is homeomorphic to open interval 0, 1 with the usual metric. That, or real line with usual topology is homeomorphic with open interval 0, 1 with subspace topology. Now, real line with the usual metric or the usual topology is a complete space. Every Cauchy sequence converges, but you know, open interval 0, 1 is not complete. So, a homeomorphism doesn't preserve completeness, but while the linearity comes into the picture, that will ensure the preservation of completeness. So if there is a linear homeomorphism from X to Y, then the linear space X is complete if and only if Y is complete. So you can see the interplay between the linearity structure and also among the topological along with the topological structure. So the interplay between the linearity and the topological structures. Now the question we are considering, is it possible to make any linear space a Banach space? Is it possible to define a norm such a way that all Cauchy sequence happens to be converged? You can prove that a Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis. Actually, the proof depends upon Bayes' theorem. I am not going to the details. So using Bayes' theorem, one can establish that a Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis. What this Hamel basis means? Hamel basis means, Hamel is a name of a mathematician, George Hamel, a German mathematician. He's a student of Hilbert. Hamel basis means that you are having a basis such that any vector can be expressed as a finite linear combination. So Hamel basis is the usual basis that we are considering on vector spaces. In functional analysis, we are considering different bases like orthonormal basis, Schroeder basis. That is why, in order to distinguish between them, we call the ordinary basis as a Hamel basis in honor of the German mathematician George Hamel. So it can be proved that a Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis by appealing with Bayes' category theorem. So you consider C0 the space of all scalar sequences with only finitely many non-zero terms. You can see that the standard basis vectors En with 0, 0, 0, 1 only at the nth place and 0 elsewhere, that vectors E1, E2, E3 extra forms a Hamel basis for the space C naught naught. Therefore, you can conclude that C naught naught is not a Banach space under any norm. We have noted it under P norm, it is not closed. Therefore, it is not a Banach space. But under any norm also, it is not a Banach space. Similarly, the case of all polynomial functions on the interval AB. Because here, any polynomial, any polynomial is an expression of the form a0 plus a1x plus a2x square plus a3x cube plus extra plus anx raised to n for some finite n. So the monomials 1, x square, x cube, extra forms a countable, enumerable Hamel basis for the space PAB. Therefore, PAB is also not a Banach space under any norm. So it is not possible to make any linear space into a Banach space by defining norms on it. So these spaces can be Banach spaces under any norm. So from this result, a Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis. We can conclude that any Banach space is either finite dimensional or it has a Hamel basis which is uncountable. Or more generally, you can show that every infinite dimensional separable Banach space, separable means having a countable dense subset. So every infinite dimensional separable Banach space has a basis which is in one-to-one correspondence with the set of real numbers. So every infinite see, a Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis. Therefore, every Banach space is either finite dimensional or it has a Hamel basis which is uncountable. And every infinite dimensional separable Banach space has a basis which is in one-to-one correspondence with the set of real numbers. Therefore, you can see that a Hamel basis for the space of all real valued continuous functions on AB must be uncountable. But here we have some advantages. The space of all continuous functions on AB, real valued continuous functions on AB, the sequence of linearly independent functions. For example, you consider the monomials 1, x square, x cube, extra will span the space in some sense. Not exactly spans, but with the Weierstrass approximation theorem that you have studied, Weierstrass approximation theorem, what it says, any continuous function can be approximated by a uniformly convergent sequence of polynomial functions. It is always possible to find out a sequence of polynomial functions that uniformly converges to any continuous function. So for example, e power x is not a polynomial, but you can get a sequence of polynomial converging to e power x. So like that, any continuous function can be approximated, can be obtained as the limit of a sequence of polynomial functions. And the polynomial functions having they are having the space of all polynomials having a countable Hamel basis. So in that way, even though the space of continuous functions on AB is any Hamel basis must be uncountable, but you can approximate any continuous function by means of a sequence of polynomials with the help of Weierstrass approximation theorem. So every continuous function, according to any given precision, we can approximate it. So in that sense, we are having a sequence of linearly independent functions that spans, not exactly spans, but can be obtained as the limit of the span of a space. Okay, like that. Now, these ideas shows that the concept of Hamel basis is not suitable for dealing with arbitrary norm spaces. So we have introduced the concept of Schroeder basis. Schroeder basis means you are having a sequence of vectors with norm 1 and any element of the space can be represented as the sum of a infinite linear combination. Sum of the infinite linear combination. Now that concept of Schroeder basis is there. And it can be shown that if a space has a Schroeder basis, then the space will be separable. And it can be shown that every separable Hilbert space. Hilbert space means complete inner product space. I am not going to the details. Every separable Hilbert space has a Schroeder basis. But the question whether every separable Banach space has a Schroeder basis. That question was an open question for a long time. Almost all the classical separable Banach spaces have Schroeder basis. But finding them is a difficult process. But it is known that almost all the classical Banach spaces have separable Banach spaces have Schroeder basis. So the question, does every separable Banach space have a Schroeder basis, remained as an open problem for a long time. But in 1973, a mathematician called Per and Flo shown that it is not the case. He found out a closed subspace of C0 which doesn't admit any Schroeder basis. So that open problem was settled by Einfeld. Now, okay, let us consider this question. Is it possible to embed every norm space? See, we have seen that it is not possible to make all the norm space as a Banach space. Now the question is it possible to embed it densely in some Banach space? Somehow you can make it a Banach space. So there is a way, if you have a norm space, you consider the space of all bounded linear functionals, all linear maps, bounded linear maps from X to K. That space is known as the dual space. And there is a way to get a norm there using operator norm. With respect to that, it will always be a Banach space. Generally, if X and Y are any norm space, you can consider the space of all bounded linear maps from X to Y, and there is an operator norm on that space, and it can be shown that BLXY with respect to the operator norm is a Banach space if and only if Y is a Banach space. Here K is a Banach space, therefore you can see that whatever norm space X you take, the dual space X prime is always a Banach space. Now you consider the dual space of X prime, that is the double dual of X double prime. And for any X in X, you can define this map small jx from X prime to K by jx of F equal to F of X. Then this jx will be a linear map, and jx will belongs to, it is bounded, and the norm of jx will be equal to norm X. So it belongs to the double dual of X. And by using this, you can get a map capital J from X to the double dual of X, namely J of X equal to small jx. This J can be shown that it is a linear map, it is an isometry. So this will give you an isometric embedding of X in its double dual. And you know that the dual space of any norm space is a Banach space. In particular, X double prime is also a Banach space. So you have a way to embed a norm space X into a Banach space. This embedding is known as the canonical embedding. So this is a isometric embedding. So if you take the closure of J of X, which will be a closed subspace of X double prime, and X double prime is a Banach space. So the closure of any subspace of it is again a Banach space. So Jx closure, that means Xc is a Banach space. We will call it as the completion of X. We will call it as the completion of X. And this space is known as the, okay, this space is a Banach space, and this is known as the completion of X. And this X, okay, therefore we have J of X is a dense as a subspace of Xc. So in this way, you can embed any norm space densely as a subspace of a Banach space. Okay, this is known as the completion. So in this way, every norm space, even though you cannot make it a Banach space, but it is always possible to embed densely in a Banach space. So that is about the norm spaces. Okay, so the time is crossing, and so we will finish our lecture by just pointing out some recent research areas. See, you know, there is a modern branch of functional analysis which is known as non-commutative functional analysis, which is being aroused out of the fact that, you know, generally multiplication of scalars or point-wise multiplication all are commutative, but generally matrix multiplication and operator multiplication are not commutative. Therefore, we have a non-commutative analog of many ideas. So in that way, many branches of mathematics developed non-commutative analogs. There is a theory around 1990 about the study of operator spaces has developed, and it builds a big bridge between the theory of norm spaces and that of operator algebras. This theory is a rapidly developing branch of functional analysis, and it gives a non-commutative generalization of Banach space theory. And this theory gives a more general setup to study the structure of operator algebras and their classification. And the study of these operator spaces is being developed out of the study of completely positive and completely bounded mappings. And the developers of this theory are mathematicians called Effros, Rowan, Fletcher, Tessier, and Van Paulsen, Wittstock, etc. All these fellows are very great mathematicians, currently also doing research in developing this developing this theory into new heights. So this is the non-commutative functional analysis or the theory of operator spaces. I'm not going into the details, but an operator space consists of a Banach space X with an isometric embedding of that space into B of X. That means bounded linear operators on some Hilbert space. You know, any Banach space can be viewed as a space of continuous function on a compact Hausdorff space up to isometric isomorphism. The operator space can be regarded as a space of operators on a Hilbert space. These operator spaces are regarded as non-commutative Banach spaces, and their theory is known as non-commutative functional analysis or quantized functional analysis, and they play a very important role in the study of quantum information theory and many areas of quantum mechanics and other branches of applied physics. So in operator space theory, instead of a single norm, we are having a sequence of matrix norms and matrix ordering. This will reflect many non-classical features associated with the non-commutativity of our operator multiplication, and it will be helpful to study the problems in Banach space and as well as in operator algebra in a more general setup, and it will lead to the new solutions of very old classical problems, unsolved problems in functional analysis. So this is a new developing area of functional analysis, namely the theory of operator spaces, or which can be regarded as a part of non-commutative functional analysis. So these are some useful references for functional analysis part, a first course in functional analysis by the author or Moshe Shalit, published by CRC Press in 2017, and for a first reading on operator spaces, there is a book published on 2000 by E.J. Effros and Sergey Rowan. They formed the theory of operator spaces. The fundamental theorem of operator spaces is obtained by Rowan under the guidance of Effros. So with this, I think I finish my lecture here. So thank you everyone for the.
Thank you, Vinod sir.
Okay.
Sir, some questions are in comment box.
Okay, let me check. Okay, so what are the questions? Okay, the difference between Schroeder basis and Hamel basis. Okay, Hamel basis means we are expressing the any vector as a finite linear combination. In case of shorter basis, we are expressing it as a sum of an infinite series. And also we are having some more conditions like the norm of the basis vectors should be 1. Okay. So we are not representing as a, see, in Hamel basis, any vector can be represented as a finite linear combination of basis vectors. In shorter basis, we are some condition like that, the norm of each vector must be 1 is there, and also any vector can be expressed as the sum of a infinite linear combination. So that is a major difference. And for a for a norm space, the Hamel basis doesn't make is not much useful. As you know, we cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis for a Banach space. A Banach space cannot have a denumerable Hamel basis. Therefore, the idea of shorter basis is more suitable for dealing with norm spaces. Okay. In fact, every orthonormal basis will serve as a, for a Hilbert space theory, they will be a shorter basis. And now the question is, why we consider 0 less than p less than 1? That is a good question. Why we are considering 0 less than p less than 1? I think Anubrata Singh Roy is asked that question. See, that idea will be clear if you look at the open balls. See, I have some difficulty in showing the pictures, that is why. If it possible, I will display the, I wish to display the unit balls in R2 with respect to 1 norm, sup norm, and 2 norm. Okay, let me, as it is not possible to display, I will explain in words. In R2, you consider the 1 norm. If you consider the 1 norm, then what will be the unit sphere? What will be the unit sphere? With respect to 1 norm, the unit sphere will be a unit square which is arranged in the shape of a diamond. And with respect to 2 norm, it will be the unit circle. And with respect to the sup norm, it will be the square. Okay. So for P, between 1 and infinity, the unit spheres will be in between the square outside as well as the, in between the unit circle and as well as the outside unit square. But if you go for, take the values for 0 less than p less than 1, what happens to the unit ball? It will become shrunk into the inside square so that it will become not convex. It can be proved that in a norm space, the unit balls are all convex. If you take 0 less than p less than 1, the convexity will lose. Of course, you can show some other reasons why they are not considering, why they not being a norm can be proved. But I think this geometric explanation will be more interesting. You can look it at Google, you can see the pictures. What is the meaning of BLXK for the map? BLXK means the space of all bounded linear functions from x to k, which we denoted by x prime. Okay. Another question is, can you once again say the implication of C0 naught to LP? See, C0 naught is the space of all scalar sequences with only finitely many non-zero terms. If you have only finitely many non-zero terms, then of course sigma mod x of j power p contains only finitely many terms. Then what happens? It will be finite. Sum of a finite number of terms, so certainly it will be finite. So you can see that every member of C0 naught will belong to LP or any P. The classical Heilbronn theorem doesn't hold for infinite dimensional spaces. It will work only in finite dimensional space. Okay. Is there any? So, asking about hand-balance separation theorem. So that you can refer to any standard textbook. Hand-balance separation theorem is about separating two sets by using some hyperplanes. Okay. See, in LP spaces, we are considering only P with 1 less than P less than infinity. Then only it makes sense. That is why we are considering only the P integrable functions with 1 less than P less than infinity. Okay. Is there any other questions?